My name is Sean Sikora. I'm a commissioner in Monongalia County. And one of the most difficult things to deal with in Monongalia County, probably more difficult than anywhere else in the state, is infrastructure. We have so much going on in Mon County, and we have so much growth that our growth is outpacing our critical infrastructure, and that's always been since coming into office, and obviously living here as a citizen for 30 years. I've always noticed that we're always a little bit of ahead of our infrastructure, and that's not. It's really kind of a blessing and a curse. So I do appreciate being asked to participate in this conversation, and we have a great panel of different individuals to talk about different things in regards to infrastructure planning. I'm interested in listening in too. A lot of these people are my colleagues that I work with, also individuals that I'm very interested in hear their what they have to say. So when we planned this, we actually didn't put a lot about broadband. Broadband is probably the infrastructure that gets the most talk these days. And here in Monongalia County, we actually have an initiative where we just approved a consultant this week to provide a comprehensive plan. There was so much talk about broadband and so much talk about with the pandemic. There's everybody running around with a lot of money in their pocket to actually do something, but no real plans to do that. And that's kind of what we've been a victim of sometimes in Mon County, is kind of getting out ahead of the planning and managing our growth. So it's an interesting and exciting project that I'm happy to lead, and because broadband is it's a utility. It's a utility that everybody needs to have access to. So that's something that we're also working on. It's just important as the roads and the electricity and the water. And this past year and the pandemic has proved that. So anyhow, very interested in listen to the whole group, and we got a great group here to further this conversation. So I'll kind of get out of the way, and I'll start letting you hear from our experts. The first person we want to hear from is our own Bill Austin. Bill Austin is the director of our MPO, that's in Monongalia and Morgantown area Metropolitan Planning Organization. And Bill's going to talk about the overview of the transportation and comprehensive planning process. So Bill.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And just as a way of a quick introduction, not everybody may be familiar with metropolitan planning organizations. Our task is really to pull together the local communities and to develop a long-range transportation plan for the area. Commissioner Sikora sits on the governing board of our MPO, which is made up of 14 individuals, primarily from the area. And they include Morgantown, the city of Morgantown, Monongalia County, Granville, Westover, Star City, Mountain Line Transit, West Virginia University, and we also have a large, diverse stakeholder group. MPOs are actually required for any urban area with a population over 50,000, and they have two primary responsibilities. The first responsibility is to develop a long-range transportation plan for the area to accommodate the area's vision for growth in the future and the transportation needs of the community. And the other thing that our policy board does is to approve the use of federal surface transportation funds for any project within the urban area, and which in our case is defined as Monongalia County in its entirety, even though really the urban area is a subset of Monongalia County. Just to let you know, everybody's concerned with transportation projects, and particularly roadway projects. We also work with transit and bicycle and pedestrian projects, but just to let you know, some of the projects that over the last decade that the MPO has worked with the Division of Highways on include There was a major restriping of Beechhurst Avenue several years ago. We worked with that. The complete replacement of the downtown signal system, as well as the installation of signals on West Virginia 705 coordinated signal systems, and also on Beechhurst Avenue in the downtown area. The Boulevard widening project you may have seen, where we went from 4 lanes to 5 lanes from the Coliseum down to Boyers Avenue in Star City. That was a significant project. The West Virginia 7 Greenbag Road intersection improvement project. Maple Drive reconstruction and relocation project. That was a significant project. The completion of the Mon-Fayette Expressway was another project the MPO worked on, as well as the construction of exit 153 and the replacement of the Isis Ferry Bridge, and also the Hartman Run Bridge, which the County Commission was strongly involved with. So we've had a lot of good transportation projects in the past. We've got several significant ones going on. Even as we speak, the Greenbag Road project, which you all may be familiar with, completing the Mile Ground project. Two-thirds of the Mile Ground project have been completed. The one with the roundabout and also coming up Easton Hill, but the center section. And I bring this project up because I think I can use it as a good example of why this whole session is important. And projects to improve Beechhurst Avenue, Van Voorhees project, Road, a good portion of that is also programmed. An improvement to West Run on the western section, including the intersection with Point Marion Road, which many of the locals may have heard about trucks getting stopped on at that intersection because, frankly, it's a bad intersection and they cannot traverse it. They end up getting stuck on it. As well as the Exit 155 project, which has been in the news as well. So the MPO has been involved with all of those projects, and we look forward to continuing our partnership with DOH and with all our local governments to keep these projects moving forward. So that was my little advertisement to the MPO. Now I'll talk more about the big picture and what we're talking about. And Mike will discuss more in depth. Really, comprehensive planning and the transportation plan fit together like a hand in glove. And when you think about transportation, particularly roads in particular, what a road does is serve the surrounding land use. And it is a way for people to get to and from their work. It's to get to their homes, to go shopping where they need to. And so to develop a good transportation plan, we have to understand the land use and the future land use of the area so we can plan for it. We have regional travel demand models that do that. But the guiding principle really is the planned land use for the community and future growth and how that works. If we have a bad view of what and understanding of what future growth looks like, then we won't be able to plan the roads and the other transportation infrastructure, transit service, and so forth that are needed to serve the community now and in the future. So for us, the comprehensive plan serves as the foundation and the land use it has for the future transportation network. So we have worked and invited all of the urban areas, local governments to participate in updating their comprehensive plans with the same essential consulting team. And so we will be able to feed the comprehensive plans that are being developed by our communities into our long-range transportation plan. The areas, local governments essentially all have to update their comprehensive plans on the same time schedule. They have to be updated every 10 years, while we update our long-range transportation plan every 5 years. So we had a previous process in 2012 and 2013, where the city of Morgantown and the town of Star City updated their comprehensive plans at the same time we were doing our transportation plan. And now we've got the city of Morgantown and Monongalia partnering with us in a very similar effort. So that's an exciting prospect. But I do want to kind of get into the micro. I mentioned the mile ground as being a poster child of why this is important. When the mile ground was developed, there was no county zoning. Now there's only a small portion of the county that's zoned, and there was no subdivision ordinance. And if you drive down the mile ground, which I think most of our audience would be familiar with, what you see is basically a sea of pavement. You've got the DOH road, and then you've got a large number of businesses that have access to that road following DOH guidelines, which are actually are not very restrictive. But you have a sea of pavement, and what happens with all those driveways is each driveway is a friction point for drivers, and it creates congestion because people are trying to get onto the road pretty much in a willy-nilly fashion. And so when we talk about land use, it's just it is the land use of all those businesses, but it's also how they access the road. And a lot of times we can address that kind of access through what's known as access management. And that happens as part of the comprehensive planning process in its entirety, which goes from the development of the comprehensive plan down to the regulations that are designed to help implement that comprehensive plan through subdivision regulation and through zoning. And so the land use plans are very much the fabric that the transportation plan is built on. And when we have problems with congestion and access, that stems from the land use as well as from the transportation. They have to work together. The road shouldn't exist if it's not providing access to these important land uses, but also land use has to be done in such a way that it is not negatively impacting how the road operates. So it is a system that works in a well-oiled fashion, and it should all work together. And so I'm really happy to have our colleagues here who are working on the land use side and also helping us to develop the transportation plan to help you understand how all this works together and how we can help build a better community. And I think that's a pretty good overview. And I think what we will have now is kind of digging a little bit more into the details of how all this works. So we're really appreciative of your attendance in this meeting, and we hope we will be able to answer all your questions. And thank you for your time and interest. Commissioner?
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. The agenda list in regards to comprehensive planning was one of our consultants going to pipe in. I wasn't sure who you had identified. Okay.
Yeah,
so
Matt? Yes. Sean, can we let's frame out what it is we're doing as well. Bill did a great job looking at the big picture, the umbrella. But as far as the project itself, it's really threefold, right? My name's Mike Rutkowski. I work for Stantec. We'll be the lead prime on this project, and we'll be primarily focused on the MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This is the blueprint, if you will, that Bill alluded to. That'll give him direction and guiding principles and projects, really financially and fiscally constrained over the next 30, 35 years. So that's his Bible, making decisions, and his board making decisions about regional transportation. So we'll take the lead on that. With us today as well, there's this part two is the first of two comprehensive plans. The first one is Monongalia County Comp Plan led by Matt Newcastle with City Explained, and he's going to be working hand in hand with Andrew Gaspray at the county level, and he'll share some thoughts on there. And then Ron Sessoms, the roadside Harwell, is going to be handling the Morgantown City Comprehensive Plan, working hand in hand with Ricky Yeager too. So I just want to clarify what that is. Over the next year and a month, year and 2 months, we're looking to, that's pretty much the schedule. We'll get into a little bit more deep dive. So Matt, go ahead.
Sure, great. And thank you for inviting me to this. We really do look forward to the partnership. And as Mike had mentioned, we'll be working with Andrew, the commission, as well as all the citizens of Mon County, kind of thinking about their future. And the comprehensive plan offers one of those rare opportunities as a community that you get to really look forward You get to look at all the different topics and things that are important to you at one time. So it's not just a transportation plan or a land use plan, but we're also looking at the infrastructure. We're looking at the environment, housing, quality of life. There's a long list of things that we look at. And it does end up becoming the formal statement or policy about growth, development, and conservation moving forward. It's an organizing document, something that's more predictable and that we can all plan from. But really, in this context of Infrastructure Week, a lot of times the comprehensive plan creates the demand for which the infrastructure providers need to think about. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about transportation and where you put different land uses and how intense they are. Contributes to the trip generation, how many trips, how long those trips are, the routes they have to take, what kind of modes they can take. If we're talking more about economic development and land use, going back to the broadband item that's been brought up before, how do we connect all of those so we're all working from the same song sheet? Things like water and sewer service, let's make sure where we're putting those investments or where the growth is going or wants to go. So the comprehensive plan is that great opportunity to really just get everyone coordinated. And then the other thing I would like to mention is while West Virginia has state rules that we have to follow, the best comprehensive plans that we can write, and the only way we want to write this is if it takes on the personality of the specific community. And so in that regard, what we're trying to do is make sure we meet state requirements or certain topics we need to talk about. But really, this has to be something that's exciting to the community. It's got to have grassroots support and champions for change or champions to protect certain items as you go forward. And so again, we're really excited about this and where we're at. As was mentioned, we're going to be the consultants working as a direct extension of staff on the Mon County effort, but we're also looking forward to working very closely with Morgantown and all the others in the region to collectively plan for our future.
Oh, thank you, Matt. Ron, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Ron Sessoms, and I'm urban planner, urban designer with Roadside and Harwell. And we'll be working directly with the city of Morgantown to provide the update to their comprehensive plan. And Matt, I think you described it spot on. The comprehensive plan is that once, I wouldn't say in a lifetime, but every 10-year opportunity to really reevaluate the city's goals, build in that community, response and reach out to the community and figure out what the vision is for the community as far as growth and other critical elements contained in the comprehensive plan to make sure that we're moving forward in the right way. And as you had mentioned, the comprehensive plan include many topic areas from housing to land use to community facilities to economic development. It contains all the different elements that really outline how the community will evolve over time. So it's a really good opportunity to think about how those growth elements are tied to transportation and infrastructure and how those different components work together. And you touched on it as well, community engagement. Community engagement is a centerpiece to the comprehensive plan and making sure that we're bringing the community together, building consensus around how the city will grow or county or municipality will grow over time as well. That's something that's very important and something that we've worked into our approach to the comprehensive planning process as well.
Exactly. And Matt, you touched on something and I didn't want to forget about it, but you were talking about as you're planning this, making sure we're getting the infrastructure to where it needs to go, water, broadband. One of the things we forget a lot, and this happens a lot in this county, is as you have a development popping up, schools are always a last. It's like the last thing everybody thinks of. Well, you're going to have all of a sudden a development over here, and now all of a sudden you have all these families and off this road. Where are they going to go to school? And how do you plan that better so that you don't, have issues with buses trying to get to areas that you can't, they can't traverse. So that's almost another thing that, is almost like a last second thing that rather it needs to be done up front. And we've tried to do that a lot when we're talking about the developments are going in one county. Okay, you're going to put this development over here, making sure that the school board is also participating in that conversation so they know what their plans need to be, and it's that overall communication, so that everybody's kind of aware of where you're going so that, it doesn't, somebody else lives downstream, you're causing somebody else a problem rather than having that conversation up front so everybody can plan a little better. So I'm sorry, Mike, do you have anything else to add?
if you're ready to talk about transportation plan.
Yes,
That's
yes.
good. Awesome. Sean, thank you. And I'm going to relay back to the agenda here. And so honestly, Sean and Bill and Amy asked us to answer a few questions. So let me take a couple minutes. Again, we'll be handling the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And Bill did a great job laying the foundation of what that is. There's three questions that they wanted us to address. The first one is realizing that transportation is not just for roads. What components go into the transportation plan? Very good question. And I think Bill kind of alluded to that earlier. It is multimodal. We will take a look at bicycle, pedestrian, trails, roads, even connectivity. Some of those connectivity roads may not be built by the city. It may not be built by DOH, West Virginia DOH, may be built by the development community. And that is very, very important. We've got to partner with our liaisons that are developing our community, helping to develop our community, and make sure that we are addressing the needs of connectivity and safety and congestion relief. Other components, we might even get into select corridor improvements. Mainly, I think it's centered around what Bill alluded to earlier, like complete streets, making sure that these corridors address not just vehicular mobility, but make sure it can move people to places, and as well as micromobility, right? There's a lot of interest in scooters. There's a lot of interest in e-bikes and the like. First mile, last mile, when it comes to transit integration and connectivity is going to be important. But all of this needs to be financially, fiscally constrained. And what we mean by that is this. It just can't be a pie in the sky plan. So whatever money, we'll look at the money, the funding programs that DOH, the city, the county, the MPO are integrated in, and better understand where that money's coming from and how much is going to be received by the region over the next 30 years. And what I mean by financially, fiscally constrained, we've got to allocate those projects or that money, that funding, those funding categories to select projects that are multimodal. And that's what determines and makes up what we call that fiscal constraint, okay? The second question that you have is what factors go into the prioritizing projects that are identified in the transportation plan? That is an absolute fantastic question. And nowadays, we're trying to remove the subjectivity, right? Someone else making decisions for you in terms of your priorities, but more or less help us to make it more of a quantifiable and qualitative analysis and evaluation. We will actually create what we call these criteria, things that we can, metrics that we can measure, and it might be land use. It could be return on investment, tax implications on the soft side. And outside of the core typical measures of effectiveness like safety, crash reduction, congestion relief, and things like of that nature, travel time savings, that sort of thing. So all of those criteria will be used to evaluate each and every single one of the projects that we collectively as a group come up with. And then we'll put them into different buckets based on the different modal components. The last question you asked was, what's the public involvement? What is the public involvement in developing the transportation plan? And honestly, we've got a real detailed project work plan with this and a schedule. Over the next 12 to 14 months, we'll be working collectively. The comp plans will be integrated with the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. We're going to have a lot of cross-pollination, if you will, where we'll meet with folks, and outreach is part of that. We'll be hosting things like we've got an advisory committee. In fact, all three of these projects have their own advisory committee. The MTP, the transportation plan, has everyone within the advisory committee. In other words, all of those communities, including Star City and Granville, are a part of this advisory committee. And so we'll have that. We'll host an online website and with a survey, and we'll actually produce a freight survey. I think that's pretty interesting. Now we're talking about infrastructure, understanding the logistics and constraints with freight mobility is really, really important. So we're going to ask them some very detailed, specific questions about improvements within the region. We'll also conduct stakeholder and focus group meetings. We'll host a project symposium. What does that mean? That's basically a public open house, right? And we're going to have a lot of interactive exercise, but it's really where we talk about identifying some of the problems, some of the issues, some of the needs, and really start to craft that vision for the overall mobility challenges for the region. We'll host what we call a building block exercise. And this is actually interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. With all the comp plans in the areas, we want to better understand where are growth nodes, where are opportunities to put in some density or putting housing or mixed use or activity nodes. And so we call that a building block exercise. And it's all about land use and development and identifying development nodes. Next, we'll be talking about or connecting with our policy boards, right? We got commissioners, we have council, we have the planning board and relative to the MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, which Bill runs. And so we want to keep them up to date periodically, and that's pretty important. We'll also host another project open house to really allow people to say, this is what you told us, these are some of the recommendations. Now let's talk about prioritization and how we move forward to implementation. And then last but not least, we'll allow the public to review our document, allow them to understand where those recommendations are, what they were based on, and how this is framed out over the next 30 years. So I'm hoping that kind of answers 1, 2, 3 your questions. Bill, is there anything else, or Sean, that you can think of that we need to address in terms of the transportation side?
Bill, you're muted.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that when we talk about the prioritization criteria and the need for projects, a large part of that is actually sculpted by the stakeholders, the public that participate in our process, as well as the policymakers who are the ones who we look forward to help us implement the projects, as well as the development community, as you said, Mike, which partners with us. So we want this to be an inclusive process. We need input. And that includes our partners at the Division of Highways and Department of Transportation. To make all this work, we need everybody pulling in the same direction. And this process is a way, in my opinion, of building a consensus with the community and with those who are working with us to implement it, to get us all where we want this community to be. Yeah. So I think that's what I wanted to add, Mike. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. Thanks, Mike, Matt, Ron. Really appreciate it. We're going to change subjects a little bit. We're going to talk about land use planning and the regulatory view. And for that, we have Ricky Yeager with the City of Morgantown, the city's Development Services Director, and we have Andrew Gass-Bray. And which one you want to go first? You're muted, Ricky.
I'll go ahead and kick it off. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Again, my name is Ricky Yeager, and I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague, Andrew Gass-Bray. Over the next couple of minutes, we hope to shine some light on the regulatory and plan review processes with respect to land use planning by answering the 3 questions. How do we weave together different desires in a comprehensive plan into a land use plan? What is the public's involvement in the development of the comprehensive plan, which we kind of already touched on? And how do land use regulations flow from the comprehensive plan? To answer the first question, we really need to understand the comprehensive plan outlines the community goals and aspirations in terms of community development, and that this type of document also expresses and to a lesser extent regulates public policies on transportation, utilities, land use, recreation, and housing. A critical component of that is the land use plan. And it's critical because it updates identifies current development patterns, as well as land management strategies and preferred development types. Preferred development types can include everything from traditional single-family neighborhoods to commercial corridors and neighborhood center mixed-use projects. As you can imagine, and as Bill alluded to, changes to those development patterns can have an impact on the built environment with respect to infrastructure planning. And all that being said, The land use plan really provides the framework for implementing the comp plan through updates to local zoning and subdivision requirements, which are, in my mind, more refined and detail-oriented than the comprehensive plan is. These regulatory documents are what the public interact with most and are one of Andrew and I's primary responsibilities in our profession, which is to help guide people through the regulatory environment and advise decision makers based on the vision and aspirations outlined in the comprehensive plan. So to go down a little bit further, if we look at zoning regulations divide the planning area into district or zones and adopts regulations concerning the types of land uses that are permitted. Again, single family, multifamily, commercial, or industrial. Subdivision regulations, on the other hand, look at the land development. And for example, for a given type of development, it establishes certain minimum standards and layout characteristics. This differs from zoning regulations or land use plan in the comp plan, as they look at what should go where. And if we go down further, looking at building codes actually regulate the construction, some operational standards for buildings with respect to life safety and other codes. So, that's really how the comprehensive plan and the land use plan kind of, work together, and why the land use plan is such a critical component. But again, what is the public's involvement in developing the land use plan? While the comp plan is meant to be an aspirational and visionary document, it also provides concrete principles and guidelines that planners and local officials should consider when evaluating new construction and or infill redevelopment projects. Officials also use the land use plans to make determination on applications to rezone property, for instance, or grant variance requests on issues like off-street parking and density requirements. So input up front during the comprehensive planning process is paramount. Working with our planning consultants, the city and county intend to facilitate, as already alluded to, several public and stakeholder group meetings to better understand our local strengths, challenges, and opportunities for the future, which will go to and inform the different plan components and then ultimately the long-range transportation plan for the county. Other opportunities to get involved in the planning process are made available when a project comes through plan review. For example, if someone is requesting a variance for off-street parking or for a new multifamily housing development, the community will have an opportunity to express their support or concerns, for instance, at a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. Or if the applicant is seeking to rezone property, they would have an opportunity to comment on the change in land use, both at the Planning Commission and City Council. So regardless of the type of project or regulatory document that we're talking about, comp plan, zoning codes, subdivision ordinances, the public has an opportunity to provide input throughout the plan review process. And we look forward to that process beginning shortly. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew to answer the last questions and maybe follow up with some frequently asked questions. Thank you.
Arrest, you're muted.
If I may, Ricky, we had a little technical glitch. And so Andrew, unfortunately, and Bill and our moderator were trying to get back in. So maybe in the essence of time here, Ricky, if you don't mind, maybe going on with some of the additional questions that and Andrew can wrap up for us.
Absolutely. So, how the third question was, how do land use regulations flow from the comp plan? And I kind of touched on that in my comments before, but once the comprehensive plan is adopted, typically it will take a look at what are the current land uses in the community, where do we think things are going to change, and then it'll make recommendations on, like, for instance, updating subdivision ordinance requirements or updating the zoning code. And actually the city of Morgantown is getting ready to embark on its own update of its subdivision and land development ordinances based on the 2013 plan. And so the comprehensive plan and land use management document is, again, really foundational in terms of how a community, or in this case, the county, update their regulatory documents to help guide development towards that brighter future.
And then finally, you answered the difference between zoning and subdivisions.
Yeah, I think.
Hey, Russ.
Yes.
I'm back. I apologize. Apparently the internet in the courthouse went out because Andrew and Bill are downstairs. So if anybody has their number, just text them and tell them to come upstairs and they can jump in here. I had to get on the public Wi-Fi. So again, Russ, here's your lead in. There's the need for
John, I'll reach out to Bill.
more reliable broadband. So where did we leave off?
So I believe Ricky kind of wrapped up at least the 3 or 4 questions that were presented. Unfortunately, Andrew fell off, so maybe we can move forward, and when he gets back on, he can wrap up a little bit from the county's perspective as well.
Yeah, because I really wanted him to talk about, I mean, we have right now in draft form, we have some land use and subdivision ordinances that we're going to be talking about a lot in the near future. And a lot of confusion is, the difference between that and zoning. So hopefully we'll get Andrew back on and can talk about that a little bit. So the next item on the agenda is economic development. Russ, I'll go ahead and let you jump in.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate being a part of this panel because basically good planning makes for better communities. And I know not everybody understands it, and it gets a bit confusing when you're particularly when you're dealing with the zoning and some of the regulation aspects but to be perfectly honest, there's been so many times as we're trying to put projects in different locations and do different things where the general public will say, I didn't know that was going to happen here. And then you follow up with, well, we had a big session last year talking about these things and people don't engage. I really highly recommend that you engage when you see that they're having a lot of this public input, and because public input makes for a better plan. And that's important to me because as we try to, as the Chief Economic Development Organization in this community, it's important that we are bringing things in and putting them in places that make sense, both from a location standpoint, but also cost effective. It makes no sense for us to put a large factory or a large facility that may drive 200-300 cars a day in a place that's not suited for it. That only adds costs and adds angst to the community and to the government, and that's not what we want to do. We want growth, good growth. Good growth is managed growth. Good growth is bringing the right type of jobs in as needed. Good growth is adding value to the community in terms of spin-off development, be it housing or commercial or whatever. And if we don't do that in a strategic way, then we're not successful. So I really believe in planning. Sure, I have my problems with it when I can't do something I want to do, as we all do, but that's part of working through, and a good plan, you have less of that, quite frankly. And so these individuals, I mean, Ricky and Andrew are on the front lines and trying to do a good job. So a good plan makes their job easier as well. And then Sean's not hearing as many people at public hearings wanting to know what's going on. And why is that important? Because that means that, we have people engaged, we have the community engaged, and what we're doing, we need that guidance as at least in the economic development world, and I'm sure in the commissioner world and in city councils and others, to make those better decisions. There's not infinite amount of money out there, to put roads in, put water and sewer in, to do bike trails and pedestrian. But we all want a better place to live. And I think good planning helps guide us in that direction. It's not the end all be all, but it does really make the kind of community, when you go to a community that has very good planning, quite frankly, you say, wow, I really like this place. and it's kind of a subtle, intangible thing that you can't see as a resident, but you feel it when you drive around, walk around, shop, and go to your job. So that's why I support, why the partnership supports planning, while we work very closely with Andrew and with Ricky, is to make sure that, we understand what's going on. One of the first things I did was sat down with the MUB, our water and sewer provider, and I said, where are you strong and where are you weak? I need to know that, because I can't put a large user of that, 4 miles away from where they can actually handle it.
Well, Russ, I was able to get Andrew and Bill to come up, so I'd like to give Andrew a couple more minutes where he got cut off to talk about land use planning, and I'll go ahead and give him my seat.
Absolutely.
No worries. So I missed the, don't repeat what we did. Ricky, is there anything that you needed me to chime in on?
Yeah, just the last question and the different types of subdivision regulations that we discussed.
Yes. So obviously as a part of making sure that once you've decided what land use you want and you're trying to build the sites the way they need to be, that subdivision ordinance, it is for and intended for making sure the right infrastructure is where it needs to be to serve whatever land use has been proposed for that area, whether it is established by a zoning ordinance or by a developer that is deciding, hey, gee, I want to really build this kind of thing in an area that doesn't have zoning. So much of Mon County does not have zoning, the vast majority of it, and probably never will. But in that context, it is still important once you've made the decision what to build in terms of the land use, or in another sense, sometimes they do it based on building form, which they call form-based. I won't go into that unless someone asks a question. The key is to make sure the infrastructure is right, that we have broadband capacity put in there, that we have the road capacity, that we have the proper amount of water and sewer management in that development, whatever they decide it to be, that it's right size. And this is not always the fault of a developer. So for instance, if you're building a development and you'd say, oh, gee, I have 10 houses, and then next to you, another 10 houses get built, and so on and so on. Without this organization, you can't get enough infrastructure to serve all of them. The infrastructure that they built for their development is enough, but the totality needs to have some allocation to make sure it's there. So that's really the point of a subdivision ordinance, is it's designed for infrastructure. One other thing that's often not mentioned is building codes. We do not have any in the county that we enforced individually, but that is another tool trying to make sure that the building itself is meeting certain criteria, but we in the county do not do that. No. I was going to make another plug also, but I think Russ has already done it, that when you do this, it's also good for your economics, because when your infrastructure isn't right, it doesn't serve, as we've seen, to handle the big loads of a lot of people with a lot of different needs getting to a given area. And that vibrancy is really what makes a local economy go. As Mike Rutkowski mentioned earlier, those are your nodes. And so in that area, you really need a lot of organization. You need to have all of these different levels of planning working together, as we've alluded to. And that's all I was going to add.
Andrew, if I may, you might want to touch base on where the county stands at the moment on the subdivision regs process.
Certainly. At this point, we have rewritten the draft that has been online since 2020 March, but only from a standpoint of organization. Most people that got to know the old version that we had online, because it was written by lawyers that are not required to follow, because it's following the legislation, it didn't necessarily follow an easy to understand order. So we wrote that during COVID, since we were delayed at being able to explain and do workshops to help the community understand how to implement and use the subdivision ordinance. And in that context, we've reorganized it and made it much easier to follow from a document standpoint. So it is actually now a sensible document that stands alone. And we have that now online. It has been online for about a month for the public to consume, although our stakeholders have been looking at it for a while. And we are providing an updated version of the toolkit to correspond to the new organization. And we will spend the time that we need to spend to make sure that the community knows how this is useful and how to use this. We feel so confident that it's based on incentive, not based on have to. They can build the same old things that they did, but they just have to make sure that the infrastructure is right for it. But we feel like they can save money and make better infrastructure by being more efficient with the design, and we give incentives to make that happen. So that's what it's about, and it's online, and we've been communicating with lots and lots of engineers and developers who've had really good input, not just for the technical details, but also how to do it. So we worked with financiers to make sure that the process doesn't make extra burdens. That doesn't help anybody. We want to make sure that it's easy to do the right thing.
Thanks, Andrew. And while we get Sean back in the moderator's seat, and I'll just go ahead and say that, when I said earlier, good planning makes for better communities. What Ron and Mike and Matt are doing with Bill and looking at this overall picture, kind of giving the big picture view of the needs and wants, and that for Ricky and Andrew, they're on the front lines, and I encourage anybody moving forward to always engage your local planning director early in the process, because believe it or not, I found them to be more solution providers than roadblock people. So
Russ, you hit that on the head. And if as we're talking about the land use ordinances that we're talking about now, there's a lot of things out there that don't even apply, that won't apply to what people want to do with their lands. But we're offering the ability to be able to research that and analyze what you want to do for you and give you free advice, so that you just have a more informed, the public's more informed. So it's really, I look at it as we're making so many more services available to help people with their overall planning, even though it may, the ordinance may not even be, you may be exempt from whatever you're anticipating doing. So we're just trying to increase that level of communication, increase that level of outreach to citizens in the county, just have more, so they can make more informed decisions. So having said that, did we want to open it up for the remaining time for any questions?
And it'd be helpful if questions would type in the chat box, might be the best way to ask those. So I encourage anybody to use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to ask questions.
Okay. While we're waiting to see if we have any questions, do any of the panelists want to add anything else to the discussion that we may not have addressed? Because I'm watching the chat, and so far enough, here maybe go. Oh, that was you. I haven't seen any questions.
Hey, everybody did such a great job, Sean, that nobody has a question.
Yeah, even through the glitch,
Right.
which I understand has happened a few times at the courthouse, but it's an issue we've already put a solution in place to address. We're just waiting for fiber to be run between the buildings, and so we're aware of it. So I apologize to the public that three of us dropped off in the middle, but
We have a couple of great questions in the chat box.
sure. What is the best way for citizens to get involved and stay informed to learn more? That comes from Sarah Palfrey.
Chris Slater.
I'm sorry.
We will I would keep an eye on the cities and the counties planning's website, as well as the MPO's website, which is plantogether.org. The Metropolitan Transportation Plan itself will have a website that will serve as the focus, but you will be able to access that website from our websites. And also those websites will be good to follow even after the planning update processes are completed. So our website is plantogether.org, and we will have everything on that.
Yeah, and I want to point out, we have a number of advisory committee positions that are unfilled.
Yes.
So there's plenty of opportunities out there to participate. Same thing with, I believe, the Planning Commission has open positions. The Mon County Planning Commission has open positions. So if you're interested in the Mon County Planning Commission, all you have to do is contact the Mon County Commission, and they'll walk you through the process of putting an application in for that. So there's never a shortage of opportunities for volunteers to get involved in their community, especially in terms of planning and economic development.
And needs. It's not just opportunities, but we always need more.
Same true with the cities, I assume, Ricky?
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be putting together our own steering committee in conjunction with Roadside Harwell. And if anybody would like to participate in a stakeholder meeting, they can feel free to email me, and I'll put my email in the chat.
Just understand the geographic nature of it, right? So if you're in the city limits, you can do both. If you're outside the city, probably just the county. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes. I have a question here. Great presentation. Would anybody be able to comment on funding challenges that are present everywhere with aging infrastructure? Well, funding is always an issue, though we are currently in a time that we have more funding opportunities than ever. When I was talking about broadband earlier, we certainly have ample opportunities to see that project actually come to some real progress and hopefully to fruition in a couple of years. There's a stimulus infrastructure stimulus bill working its way through DC. We'll see what that looks like. There's also, obviously, in West Virginia, we have our Roads to Prosperity projects, which are a program which there hasn't, we should start seeing the fruits of a lot of that funding and those projects. I had a meeting in Charleston last week, and we were talking about a number of different projects, and really our issues were less of funding and more of there's so much going on at the same time, almost like paralysis by analysis, trying to figure out which projects need to go first and getting the engineering done and all the background stuff. So right now, we live in a time where a current period where there seems to be a lot more funding available than previous, but funding is always an issue.
Yes.
Planning, first.
Especially in the transportation field, we will also be benefiting from the stimulus projects, as well as there's a new reauthorization for the transportation planning bill coming up, and it's got a new feature to it, which are earmarks. Congress had eliminated earmarks, but we are in line for some of those earmark funds from our congressman, and the Senate has finally adopted that as well, and there's a new deadline for that. But don't look for this to last. This is a temporary situation with COVID, and we need to be ready to strike, and I think we are with a lot of our projects, but it's one of those things. It will be a bump, and then once again we will go back, I think, to a similar situation before the COVID crisis.
Yeah, and that's why we felt, even with the money we have that's allocated under the ARP program, we want to make sure that we make the best use out of those dollars that are available to get the most bang for the buck. Because Bill's right. We're at an upstage, but it won't be like this forever. So we do need to do better planning and have more cohesive and comprehensive plans going forward, so that we make the best use of all those dollars.
Yeah, it's also important to mention that the costs have gone up dramatically because of COVID as well, because there's a scarcity. The economics fell, and as a result, we don't have enough product to help build even when we do have the funding. And so that's holding up a lot of projects that we have in the pipeline as well. So it's important to consider, just because it looks like we have a lot of money, there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of access to the money, and the costs also are changing.
Yeah. And one of the things that we always hear on transportation is, well, we've got the funding secured for a project. The actual implementation process, because of engineering, design, right-of-way acquisition, the legal process, and all of that, if we get funding for a project from the Division of Highways, it's typically 7 years before that project can get constructed because of all the steps you have to go through. So it may take a while for this bump in funding to show up on the street, or as the street in my business. But that's something to keep in mind as we talk about transportation. It is a long, involved process with the environmental concerns and the public concerns. So keep that in mind as we're talking about developing these plans.
And Sean, you know, well publicized, the $10 and $20 million that was talked about here a while back. You might be helpful for the audience to understand the difference between what that's targeted for by the federal government versus the other infrastructure bill.
Well, yes, we had in regards to the ARP money, the Mon County received 20 million, 20.4 million, and the city of Morgantown received 10 something. But that right now, the guidance regarding that, and we're supposed to be getting revised guidance, but the guidance regarding that was fairly narrow. It was water, sewer, and broadband. So that's we're planning. I mean, obviously in Mon County, we could spend the 20 million on water and sewer projects that are already shovel ready. So we don't have a trouble spending that money, but we're trying to look across the county, and if that guidance changes, try to adjust. Obviously, we're going to put a lot of money into broadband too, so that 20 million could be spent very quickly just here in Mon County. But right now, that's really the guidance that we're operating on, is in regards to what we can spend that money on. So I don't see any other questions. I know the program was allotted an hour, so Amy, Russ, I'll turn it back over to you. But thanks everybody. This was I think this was a worthwhile discussion, and I appreciate everybody for participating, both from the panelists to the public. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll I think a couple questions poured in. We'll get back to answer those questions that popped up. Reach back out to you. Appreciate everybody's participation. Also, the audience's interest in this subject. It is very important, and we're pleased to be able to have some good professionals, quality people in these fields, and so. We'll put this session, it's been recorded, we'll place that on the website. So if you want to share with others, please do. And we'll wrap it up by saying, I hope to see you all at the next public input session.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.